Hey, how's it going, everyone? I am Nate Schoemer, certified professional master dog trainer, and you're watching my show on dog training. Today, we are doing a live Q&A session where we are going to be discussing focus and how to build our communication system with our dogs. I'm going to start by explaining certain things that I think about when I'm building engagement and focus and my communication system, and then I'm going to jump into the comments or the live chat to see what questions you guys have about each section as we move forward. So please bear with me for a moment so I can get this pulled up on my other screen so I can see when people start asking questions. Okay, excellent. Hey, Arm & Hammer, what's going on? So thank you for joining me as we start this live Q&A. And also, let me make sure the settings are correct. Okay, good. We are good. All right, perfect. So we're talking about focus, engagement, and our communication system. When we're working with our dogs, one of the most important things we need to do is to be able to properly communicate with them. They need to know and understand what we want and what we expect from them. And we also need to make sure that it's a two-way street. So we're paying attention to our dog, we're paying attention to their cues, as well as their body language. So we talked yesterday about building a relationship. It's the very first thing I do with any dog that I'm working with. I want the dog to want to be around me. I want to build a connection, and I want that dog to desire that because it's going to make the training easier. Once I have the dog, puppy, it doesn't matter, comfortable in the environment and a connection with me, I'm going to transition into training. And I often try to do it in a way where the dog doesn't even realize we started training. I have the dog's attention, the dog's starting to pay attention to me, we're building a relationship, and I'm going to start doing what's known as engagement training. So this is also called charging the marker. The reason why we call it charging the marker is because if you think about a marker, and let's quickly define what a marker is. I like to define a marker as a word or sound that predicts any one of the four quadrants of operant conditioning. And when we are getting a dog conditioned to a marker, this is also known as a condition reinforcer if it's predicting a reward, or a condition punisher if it's predicting punishment. If I have a sound that predicts positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment, that's how I define a marker. Now, when the dog becomes conditioned, this is under classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning. So when we have a dog conditioned, the response that they have is involuntary. If I have a dog and I say yes, and I give that dog a piece of food, and I do that enough times where the dog recognizes this pattern, and I say yes, and the dog begins to salivate. That salivation is an involuntary response. And we talked a little bit about classical conditioning yesterday. When a dog is classically conditioned to something, when they first recognize the first stimulus within the sequence, that's when we see the change of behavior, and that change of behavior is often involuntary. And operant conditioning is those four quadrants. Now, we also talked a little bit about intrinsic and extrinsic behaviors or motivators. So extrinsic is the dog is doing it. Often we're using the four quadrants of operant conditioning to possibly access a reward or prevent something unpleasant. And then when it comes to intrinsic, that means the dog is doing it because the behavior is fun. It's a self-reinforcing behavior. I like chewing up the rug. It feels good. I'm going to keep chewing up the rug. And when a dog is doing a self-reinforcing behavior, we don't have to reward it. So I use the example of protection work, sport work specifically for protection sports. If you have a dog that's doing a protection sport and you send that dog to bite the decoy, you don't have to reward the dog with a treat after it had bit the decoy. Biting the decoy is the reward. You wouldn't train a dog in a protection sport that doesn't like biting decoys. And they're not biting the decoy necessarily. The decoy is wearing the dog's favorite toy. You come out, you're wearing that bite suit, the dog sees that and they go, oh, there's my favorite toy. So you don't have to reward that. That behavior is the reward. So again, these are intrinsic. Now, when we're using our markers, as I said before, by definition, it predicts one of the four quadrants. These four quadrants help us communicate to our dogs what we want them to do. Now, we can get a dog classically conditioned to a sound that predicts a reward in an isolated sort of situation. And you really can do it in any situation. Anytime your dog's doing something that you like, as long as they're not doing something that you don't like, you can say yes or whatever your sound is, and you can follow it up with the reward. What's important to keep in mind when we're doing any kind of engagement training is the concept of overshadowing. So overshadowing applies to dogs as it applies to people. If I say yes at the same time I give my dog the food, my dog's going to be focused on the food and they're not going to pay attention to the word yes. And I also talked about this briefly the other day, but the prefrontal cortex on us as humans, when we have what's known as a working memory, and when we hear something, we have about 15 to 30 seconds of working memory before we lose the information. Meaning, if you meet somebody for the first time and they're like, hey, my name's John, and you go, hey, John, how you doing? And then you start talking about something and you didn't take that information and intentionally try to remember it. So that's when we transfer it to the hippocampus to keep it as long-term memory. If you just start talking, you're going to forget that his name is John. You're going to be like, is it Brad? Oh, John. Oh, yeah. Also, if you're doing two things at once, if you're talking to someone and let's say you have a water bottle and you're talking to them and you set down the water bottle and you keep talking and then you're like, where did I put my water bottle? Because you're paying attention to talking to them. So it's the same with our dogs. If they're paying attention to one thing, they're not going to catch the other thing if it's happening at the same time. And again, this is called overshadowing in dog training. So we have to make sure that the marker, the condition reinforcer or condition punisher, comes before whichever one out of the four quadrants that it predicts. So if I say yes, if I want yes to be my marker for a reward, I have to say yes before I give the dog the treat. So the dog hears me say yes, they go, what's that noise? And then I give them a treat. And I like to define classical conditioning as a dog's recognition of a pattern outside of their control. So if I say yes and I give my dog a treat, my dog doesn't control whether or not I give him a treat. My dog has recognized this pattern. And one of the reasons why people call it charging the marker is because if we are using the word yes or whatever word you choose, this is where a clicker trainer would click, and we follow it up with the reward, we're charging that up. It's becoming more and more powerful. So a dog isn't either classically conditioned or not classically conditioned. There's a spectrum. So the dog can be more classically conditioned and less. So you get more of a response. And if every time I mark, I follow it up with the reward, eventually that charge is going to be 100%. So let's use 1 through 100. I get it up to 100. Every time I say yes, I follow it up with the reward. If I start saying yes and I don't give the dog the reward, I lose some charge. Now, this is going to vary depending on the dog that we're working on or working with. So some dogs, I might say yes and not give the dog a treat, and I just lost 10 points. So now I'm at a 90% charge. Other dogs, I might lose 5 points. Whatever it is, it's going to vary. So for me, 99.9% of the time, if I say yes and my dog is classically conditioned to that, I'm going to give my dog the primary. I'm going to follow it up with the reward. Now, there could be a situation, let's say you're out with your dog and you don't have a treat, and you don't have a toy, and your dog does something that you like and you still want to capture it in your dog's mind. You can mark the behavior and then pet your dog, still give your dog a reward after. It may not be as valuable as the treat or the toy, because if you are like I am, we pet our dogs all the time. So it's not as valuable as getting a treat or a toy, but we're still rewarding them and we still connect it in the dog's mind. That's a good behavior. And we're going to strengthen that behavior. It's also important to know why we use markers. So there's 3 main reasons why we use markers. We know that the closer the consequence, whether that consequence is good or bad, the closer that is to the behavior, the stronger the connection in the dog's mind. If you could deliver the primary the exact moment your dog does the behavior, you're going to have a stronger connection and your dog's going to learn faster. But it's very difficult for us to do that within a second or two of a dog doing the behavior. So our markers help us bridge the gap between the behavior and the consequence. That's the first reason. The second reason is that it helps us pinpoint fine details in our training. So if I have my little doggy here and I want my dog to look at my face, but my dog's looking off to the side, the moment my dog looks at me, yes, I can mark that behavior and follow it up with the reward. So it helps us pinpoint fine details in our training. But if I'm not trying to bridge the gap, I'm not trying to pinpoint a fine detail, And I'm not using a command, so I'm not having to reinforce a stay, which is the third reason why we use a marker. I don't have to use a marker. If I'm taking food and the dog's following my food lure and I lift up and the dog sits, I could just give him the food. I don't have to mark. So I don't have to go, yes, reward. Yes, I don't have to do that. I could just, whoop, give him the treat because I'm able to give him the reward the moment that he does the behavior. The third reason we use the marker is to simultaneously release and reward the dog. If we're doing the implied stay, which is the stay that I like to do, and you can use a verbal stay too, it's all preference. If I tell my dog down, my dog's in the implied stay. So I said down, you go into the down, you have to maintain the position until I release you. When I first start adding a verbal command within my training routine, the moment the dog gets into the position, I use my terminal marker, which means release plus reward. We call it a terminal or termination marker because we are terminating the exercise. The dog did it, they're released, and they can get their reward. They jump up and get the reward, and it also increases speed and motivation. Remember, a big part about training is building a love for learning. The more our dogs love to learn, the faster they're going to learn what we're trying to teach them. So those are the three main reasons why we use our markers. Now, another thing that's important, and this is something I ask all my students, I say, when you're working with your dog and you mark a behavior. So let's say you have your little dog. I'm always hitting that mic. Let's say you have your dog and you tell your dog to down and your dog lays down and you say yes, or whatever your marker is. How long do you have to get the reward to your dog before you lose the connection? And people will say, oh, you have 1 through 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I've heard all kinds of different answers. We have as long as the dog is paying attention. So it's going to be different for each dog. If I say yes, and let's say that's my termination marker, release plus reward. If I say yes and my dog jumps up and goes, oh, where's the treat? Where's the treat? And I'm like, where is the treat? And he's like, oh, you're looking in your pocket. You're looking in your pocket. Oh, you're going in your pocket. I know you're going to get the treat. Where? You're going to get it. You're getting it. Oh, here we go. And I give it to him. I made the connection. But if I'm trying to get the treat and my dog's like, you're getting it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Squirrel. Now I've lost the connection. So as long as the dog is paying attention, so we have a good amount of time. So markers are very, very valuable at communicating what we want from our dogs and influencing their behavior through those extrinsic motivators that we talked about earlier. So before I move on to the next part, do we have any questions on that? And thank you everyone who is watching, tuning in, and hanging out. I really appreciate it. So we have some questions coming in. Hello, Nate. Love your work. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. Excited to be here, as am I. You're my favorite dog. You guys are going to make me blush. I really appreciate all that. Let's see if we can get to a question. What do you think about a Malinois apartment? I thought I just saw a spider. I live in one, but everyone says I can't handle it. But I did so much research. Okay, having a Malinois apartment, I know this isn't directly to what we're talking about, so we want to keep it on the subject of what we're talking about, markers and engagement training. You can have any size dog in any apartment if you still provide the needs that the dog has. So if you watched the live video that we did yesterday on building a relationship, it's really about giving the dog what they need. So Malinois, imprinting is very important with them. If you imprint wrong, you can have long-term issues. So socializing the right way is important for Malinois. And we'll do a video all on socializing, but the way that I look at socializing is more about exposing my dog to new things and pairing it with something pleasant, getting within close proximity of different things, but not always direct interaction. And then if you're able to do the things that your dog needs, so you're taking your dog out, maybe you're doing some tug or you're doing ball on a rope, or your dog likes frisbee, or you're doing some kind of sport with your dog, you're doing those explorations. If you're giving your dog the things that your dog needs, there's nothing wrong with being in an apartment. Think of that like the dog's den. You go in there, you sleep, you hang out, you eat food, but you have to go out and do stuff. If your dog's in the apartment all day, every day, and your dog's not getting out and not doing activities and not having chances to explore and interact with you, then you're going to have issues. But if you're able to do all those things, nothing wrong with having them in an apartment. Okay. All right, let's see. I like the implied stay too. Okay, 10-month-old husky would like to thank you. Well, thank you. It's still amazing me how much I had to recondition myself to condition my dog. Yes, I'm right there with you. It made me much more intentional about my actions and had really translated into a lot of different areas of my life. Yeah, and it's same here. Like, it took me a while to get good at separating my physical from my verbal, doing the proper movements to be more clear to my dog. And all these things come together because really, dog training is just being able to communicate with our dogs in a timely manner when they're right, when they're wrong, and being very clear about it. And also reading our dogs. I mentioned this a little bit the other day too. If I notice a sudden change in my dog's behavior, I need to figure out what's causing that. So maybe my dog has some sort of medical condition. My dog's not feeling good. I have to be in tune to these things. And actually, this is something important to note too. If you're working with someone, so I just had a lesson right before jumping on here. That's why I was a couple minutes late, so I apologize for that. But the person I was just working with, they were working with another trainer, and the trainer was having them do certain things and they didn't feel very comfortable about doing these other things. And what I told them, I said, if you don't feel comfortable, so one of the things, like, I do use corrections in my training, but anytime I work with someone, I never force them to use corrections, ever. If I'm working with a client and the client goes, I don't feel comfortable correcting my dog, meaning positive punishment. They don't want to do a leash pop. They don't want to use a remote collar. I don't say you need to do that. You have to do it, because if they're not comfortable doing it, number one, they're not going to do it. And number two, if you get them to do it, they're not going to feel good about doing it, and the dog's going to sense that. And now we've just taken all the fun out of the training. Remember, training has to be, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be, but in my world, training has to be fun. So I have to do everything in my power to make the training fun for my dog and fun for me. It has to be fun for me too, because my dog has to sense that I'm having a good time, and they can. So if my dog believes I'm having fun, they're having fun. That's another reason why I say don't train when you're angry. Don't train when you're frustrated. Don't train when you're stressed. These things are going to have a negative impact on the training, and it's going to damage the results that you could be getting, and it's going to slow down your training. So these things are very important. Is it okay to use the word good when you don't have treats during training? If you're using the word good as a marker, so if you say good and give your dog a treat, good and give your dog a treat, and your dog's become classically conditioned to that, if you use good, in my opinion, the best practice is to follow it up with the primary. So I just talked about this a moment ago. But if you don't have a reward, you can still use the word and then pet your dog, give your dog some sort of reward, but try not to do that often, because it will damage the marker a little bit. And you can build the charge back up. So let's say you use the marker and you don't have a reward, but you want your dog to know that was a good behavior, I liked it. You might deplete the charge by 5 points, but then when you go home, you do some training and you can charge it right back up. But you don't want to keep rewarding, or you don't want to keep marking behaviors and not rewarding. So that's going to really damage it. And on the long run, again, you can recharge it, but it's going to slow down the speed in which your dog is going to learn. The markers have taught my husky that her actions create good things. That's exactly one of the main points. She even comes to me now to ask for things. Last night, she asked for my brother's seat on the couch. She got it. And so this is funny. I was also talking to someone about a dog manipulating us. I don't like to use the word manipulating so much, but just like we can use the 4 quadrants on a dog can use the 4 quadrants on us. If I go to reach for a dog's bone and that dog bites me, and I go, I'm not going to reach for that dog's bone anymore, that dog used positive punishment to prevent me from repeating the behavior of trying to grab the dog's bone. If I am working on my computer and my dog bark, 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 and I go, fine, I'll take you outside, and I take the dog outside, the dog just used negative reinforcement to get me to take him outside. So our dogs can get us to do certain things based on their behavior. So just like we can train them, if you want to use this sort of terminology or words, they can train us as well. So we do have to be careful about that. Now, we would say, oh, you're rewarding a bad behavior. If it's like, okay, dog's barking at me, then I let him outside because I knew that's what the dog wanted. Yeah, I'm rewarding the dog for doing that, but the dog is also using negative reinforcement. They turn pressure on, the barking. The moment I complied, the barking goes away. And so, again, dogs can get us to do things based on that. So that's something else that you want to be aware of. And also with capturing, so capturing and free shaping. This is something else to keep in mind. Once we have our dogs classically conditioned to a sound that predicts rewards, it unlocks the ability. So if you think about a game, if any of you play video games, you do certain things that unlocks certain things within your dog's world. Once you have a dog classically conditioned to a marker that predicts a reward, it unlocks capturing and free shaping. And so capturing is, and I've actually mixed these up in the past in one of my older videos. So to clarify, capturing, the dog already does the behavior. So your dog sits or lays down or goes to the, whatever, they already do the behavior. The moment your dog does the behavior, you mark it. So you're capturing it, and then you follow it up with a reward. Free shaping, you're rewarding the dog towards steps to doing something that you want. So you have your dog wanting to do something, and your dog might look at an object. If you want your dog to go to the object, dog looks, you reward that. The dog gets closer, you reward that. And eventually your dog might be doing the behavior. Now, you can teach dogs behaviors through free shaping, but sometimes there's behaviors that are so complex, free shaping just won't work. And so then we have to do something like assisted shaping, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. But if we do a lot of free shaping and a lot of capturing, which I did a ton with my dog Ari, they will offer up behaviors if something doesn't happen soon enough. So there's been times where I'd give my dog Ari a command, she does it, and I'm having her hold the position, and it's taking too long, and she's looking at me, and then she offers up a new behavior. She spins, or she lays down. That can be an issue that can happen if we do a lot of free shaping or a lot of capturing. So if you're trying to compete, if you're trying to do AKC obedience or something like that, or even sport work, you don't want to do too much of that, because then your dog might offer up a behavior in the middle of a routine, and you're going to lose some points, or possibly NQ, non-qualify. Or if you're going through a school like the Tom Rose School where you have to do certain obedience routines, same thing might apply, but adjust according to your dog. So one of my other favorite trainers, good friend of mine, she's been on my channel a bunch of times, Bethany Perdome, she says it's not a problem unless it's a problem. Like, is it bad to let my dog on the sofa? If you think it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not a problem unless it's a problem. If suddenly my dog starts to resource guard the couch, now it's a problem. Now I might have to do something about it. Okay. How do you keep them from jumping up on us? So this we'll talk about more down the road, so with dogs jumping up, but I would recommend, for you that asked about that, go to my website. I'm going to show you real quick on my phone. So nateschoemer.com, go to blog, and you'll see up at the top, once it gets into focus, the 3 key events to dog training. Take a look at that. It's about a 15-minute read, and it breaks down exactly how I deal with those types of behaviors, which I would define as a self-reinforcing behavior. I start with a teachable moment. I teach the dog the rules. Once the dog understands the rules, then for the final stage of reliability, we can add positive punishment. Okay, how important is eye contact during training? My border collie will do behaviors I ask for, but his eyes are more focused on the reward. Okay, and so with focus, we have focus on the source, or we have focus on our eyes. So we can do both. We can have our dog focus on the source. So the source could be a ball, it could be treats, it could be something like that. And trainers that work on, let's use Frenching, for example. A lot of those trainers that I've worked with in the past, they'll teach their dog a contact heel, so the dog walks next to them and maintains contact, but the dog can focus on the target. So focus on the decoy, the source. With my German Shepherd Maverick, I focus primarily in the beginning on teaching him how to focus on source. So he focuses on the food, the toy. I'm teaching him focused heel right now. I'm really taking my time with it, and I'm using a source focus. So I have a training vest, and the training vest has a magnet that goes in the pocket in a direct line of sight from me to my dog when my dog's in heel position. And I have toys with magnets, and I attach it to my vest, and I walk, and my dog looks up at the toy. I'm getting the behavior that I want, but my dog's focused on the source. Now, of course, that's something we would have to fade later so I can get the behavior without the ball being there. But I'm using that as a tool to get the dog to do the behavior. And you can transition your dog to looking at your face. So let's say your dog's looking at the food. You got the food in your hand, you bring your hand up, your dog's staring at that. And so you wait. And then eventually your dog's like, why am I not getting the reward? This always works. And your dog looks back at your face and you go, yes. And then you follow it up with the reward. So now the dog starts to realize, oh, it's looking at your face. And if you want, you can add a focus command. So once the dog starts to look at your face, and this is how I teach the focus command, I use a noise that will get the dog to look at me. So whatever that noise is, usually I do a brr, 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 brr. When I make that noise, most dogs look at me. Now, remember, when we're teaching a dog a behavior and we want that behavior to be on a verbal command, we have to have a way that gets the dog to do it every single time when we present a cue. And in this case, the cue that I'm using is the noise. So I make the noise, dog looks at me, yes, I give the dog a reward. I make the noise, the dog looks at me, yes, I give the dog the reward. So now I know I can get the dog to look at me every time I make the noise. So now I go, focus, dog looks, yes, reward. I continue to do this till eventually I say focus, dog looks, because they learn the pattern. So again, dogs are really good at recognizing patterns. There was another one that came up. I missed it. So speeding up and slowing down, with that, speed is often based on motivation and confidence. So the more confident the dog is and the more motivated they are, the faster they move. Now, you can teach them to move slower. So let's say I wanted a dog to walk more slowly. I can do that while the dog's in heel position. I can do pace changes. And I can give the dog a command, and then I slow down, and I make the dog do it more slowly. Now, having a dog do commands more slowly might be a little bit more difficult. So if I tell the dog down, and I want the dog to move fast, or I want the dog to move slow, usually it often can depend on the context. So if I'm training my Malinois, Ari, and I have a ball in my hand, ball on rope, and she knows we're playing, and I tell her down, she's going to go down very fast. But if she's on her bed downstairs in the office and I tell her down, she might go, oh, okay, I'm going to lay down because I know it's not part of a game right now. That's more of a relaxed state. So the dog's mental state can often influence their speed. So now I'm going to go to the next part about talking about focus, markers, engagement, and communication. So we defined what a marker is, and we talked about the process in getting a dog conditioned. Basically, we're going to go into more detail why we use a marker. So the three main reasons, again, to recap: bridge the gap between behavior and consequence, to pinpoint small details within our training, and to release and reward our dog simultaneously. And how long do we have to deliver the primary after we use a marker? As long as the dog is paying attention. So now with engagement training, when I'm doing engagement training, again, it depends on what my goals are. So if I want the dog to look at my face, or if I want my dog to look at the source, or if I just want the dog to look in my direction. Once the dog does that behavior, I'm not asking for a sit, I'm not asking for a down, I'm not asking for any kind of commands. It's just the dog looks and engages with me, then I use the marker. Let's talk for a moment about clickers. So clickers were very successful for two main reasons. Number one, the click always sounds the same. Click, click, click. Doesn't matter how happy or excited you are, the click sounds the same. So if you're using your voice as a marker, you want to keep that in mind. You want your click or your verbal marker to be as consistent as possible. So for my yes, I go, yes. For Michael Ellis, for example, he goes, yes. It's a very distinct sound. Now, there's been research that has proven that a dog will become conditioned faster if the sound of the marker goes into the delivery of the reward. Meaning, let's say you say yes, and the first second is just the word, but the second continues, or the word continues into the second, and you give the dog the reward. Meaning you go, yes, and give the dog the reward. I'm still making the noise as I'm giving the dog the reward, but the start of the sequence starts before. So using the long S sound like Michael Ellis does is a really, really good way to do it. It is difficult though. So if you can do something like that, excellent, but be consistent the way you do it. If you do it how I do it, where it's a crisp, sharp yes, and then follow it up with the reward, that works as well. So whatever works better for you, but again, we have to separate the sound from the delivery of the reward if we want our dog to become conditioned. The second reason why markers were very successful, or clickers rather, is it's much easier to separate two physicals than it is to separate a physical and a verbal. More people can go click, treat, we're separating two physicals, than it is to go yes, treat. That's harder. So when you are training and you're practicing these skills, practice it without your dog. Make sure you can do it well without your dog being there. Number two, when you are working with your dog, film the training session. If you're new to training, film the training session. I know it's extra work, but I love the saying that champions study game footage. You will become a better trainer significantly faster if you film your training sessions, because you're going to be able to point out some of the mistakes. You're going to recognize it when you watch the video. And it's really powerful. Once I started filming my own training sessions and studying them, I got better much faster. So it's something I definitely recommend. So when you're using your voice, you want to keep that in mind. Remember, our dogs don't hear words. Often people get caught up in the words that they use. I'll give you an example. I use the word wrong. So wrong is my marker for negative reinforcement. When I say wrong, I'm going to use some kind of negative reinforcement, usually leash pressure or maybe the tone setting on the remote training collar. And I'm going to show the dog the preferred behavior. So let's say the dog breaks the stay. I say wrong. What do I want the dog to do? I want them to go back to the stay. So I take them back to the stay. Once they're back in the stay, good dog, but no reward, because I don't want the dog to break the position for me to put them back to get the treat. So when I say wrong, it's not a punishment. It's a signal for a reinforcement event. A reinforcement event is anytime we want our dog to perform an action. And once the dog performs the action, that concludes that reinforcement event. So when I say wrong, I'm showing the dog the preferred behavior. Now, because I use the word wrong, I've had lots of people use the word wrong or use it incorrectly. I'll give you an example. Let's say I have my little dog, and this would be wrong. And before I give you the answer, some of you are already going to know, but before I give you the answer, think about it and try to come up with a reason why. I wouldn't do this with the dog. I wouldn't tell the dog down. The dog chooses not to comply, wrong, and then I make them do it. So this would be incorrect. I wouldn't go down, wrong, make them do it. So think about that for a moment. Some of you, again, probably know the reason why, and some of you might be sitting there wondering why, because it sounds like it makes sense. Oh, the dog didn't do it. You're telling them they're wrong, and then you're making them do it. If you haven't figured it out yet, the reason why is because... Here, I'll give you an example. If I tell the dog, do the down now, cue. Do the down now, cue. Do the down now, cue. That's going to become the command. Do the down. The dog goes, you didn't finish it. Now. Oh, okay, now the dog does it. So if I tell a dog down, wrong, down, the command will literally become down, wrong. I'm teaching the dog that the command is down, wrong. So one of the rules that I have, guidelines, is I try not to do a reinforcement event in the middle of a reinforcement event. If I tell a dog down, I'm not going to say down again when they're resisting, because that's another new reinforcement event. So the way that I look at a reinforcement event, again, it's anytime I want the dog to perform an action. The moment I start one, whether it's through a command or the word wrong, that event is not over until the dog does the behavior. So if I say down, that event is over when the dog lays down. Now, there are some nuances to it, and I'll give you an example. If I give the dog the down command, so if I have the dog in front of me and the dog's excited and happy to learn, and I say, I'm going to bring the dog over here, and I say down and the dog sits, and he goes, is that it? Well, he gave me an answer. So when a dog does that, I usually give myself two options. Either A, I repeat the command, down. Dog lays down, I give the dog the reward. Because the dog gave me an answer, which this happened to be the wrong answer, I can ask again. So think about a kid who's just learning math. You go, what's 2 plus 2? 3! What's 2 plus 2? Okay, obviously 3 wasn't the answer. 4! Okay, great. So that's what I'm doing with the dog. Or I can just give the dog the answer. So I tell the dog down, the dog sits, I lure the dog into the down, I reward the dog. So in that situation, what's 2 plus 2? 3. It's 4. So that's what I do when the dog gives me the wrong answer. So I always have a process for what I'm doing so I don't have to play this guessing game. Like, for example, if I'm going to add correction, so positive punishment, I want the dog that I'm training to be 80% proficient on the command in the environment with the distractions before I add corrections. Meaning, if I train my dog in the living room and there's no distractions and my dog's 80% proficient, but then I bring my other dog in and I put my other dog on a climb stay and I'm working the dog, I just changed the environment. So now the dog's not going to be 80% proficient. So if my dog's not 80% proficient, if they haven't proven that to me, then I'm going to give the dog the answer. So if I say, what's 2 plus 2? And remember, we have that half-second pause between the command and the physical cue to prevent overshadowing. If I have the dog and I'm luring the dog, I go down, then I lure the dog into the position. I don't go down, because then the dog's not going to learn the verbal command. So that half-second pause gives me an opportunity to see whether or not the dog's going to do the behavior. So if I say, what's 2 plus 2? And the dog's going, I can tell they're trying to figure out the answer, and I'm going to let them do it. So with the dog, an actual dog example, I say down, and the dog's like, I think this is it. And they start to move down, and then I'll encourage them like, yeah, that's it. You got it. Dog lays down. I reward them. If the dog, if I give them the command and the dog gives me the wrong answer, like I said, I provide it. But if I give the dog the command, what's 2 plus 2? And they're like, I have no idea. I'm going to give them the answer. So I already know what I'm going to do if the dog's not 80% proficient. And once they're 80% proficient, then we have a different way in which we respond to them, whether they're not complying or something like that, or if the dog is distracted. So before I add any sort of corrections, if I give a dog a command, they're 80% proficient and they heard me give the command. Have you ever been watching a TV show and someone's calling your name and they're snapping their fingers and you're like, huh? What? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. So same thing with my dog. If I have my dog and my dog's sniffing and getting into something and I want to give my dog a recall command, then usually I'll be like, hey, Ari, boop, boop, boop. She looks at me, come. Okay, now she's going to come because I got her attention. I don't want to give the command when she's zoned into something. Now, in that situation, I actually use the tone on my collar because they can hear that. It's very clear, and they usually come running. But that's for a different day to discuss. So with the clicker and how it relates to us, our dogs don't hear words. And remember, people often get caught on the words. Our words to our dogs mean what they predict. So always keep that in mind. It doesn't matter. You can tell your dog no. Like I've heard people say like, oh, you shouldn't tell your dog no. It's like, why? I could tell my dog no and give my dog a treat. No treat, no treat. Guess what? No now means a treat. So now when I say no, my dog goes, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to get a treat. So our words, again, mean to our dogs what they predict. So keep that in mind. Do I have any questions on that before I move on to the next part of this? One of my dogs has learned a command. How can I remove or reduce treats? Okay, so when we are using rewards, when we first start working with a dog in the very beginning, we do what's known as continual reinforcement. We're rewarding everything. We want to start randomizing the rewards once the dog can do the behavior with the physical cue. So I used to say once the dog is responding to the verbal command, but that for a lot of people ends up taking too long. So once I can get the dog to do the behavior with the physical cue, that's when I'm spacing out the rewards. So if I have a dog and I can do a recall, I can do everything with a lure and leash cues, I can get the dog to do everything with these physical cues, that's when I start spacing out the rewards. So I might have my dog and I might go sit, I lure, down, lure, come, lure, heel, lure, free, reward. Now I'm giving the dog the reward. So I'm going to start asking the dog for more. And also the reward event is when we are giving our dog our reward, make sure the reward event is appropriate for what you're doing and don't always do the same thing. So if I have my dog and my dog does something I like and I go, yes, and I give my dog one treat. And my dog goes, every time you say yes, you give me one treat. So I give him the one treat. And now the dog goes, okay, I'm going to sniff around. I'm going to go do something over here. So now I'm losing the dog's attention because the dog has realized my pattern of always giving one treat. So sometimes I give multiple treats. Sometimes I do give one treat. Sometimes I might use my secondary terminal marker, which means release plus reward, but go get your reward. So I'm going to change it up to keep the dog thinking about the reward event, and we're also going to start randomizing. But when we have our dogs do a behavior, all behaviors are based on motivation. Access something pleasant, prevent something unpleasant, or the behavior itself is fun. Or it's a classically conditioned response. But these behaviors are determined by motivation. So I either have to make my dog believe that there's always a possibility they're going to get a reward, or my dog has to believe that there's a possibility that there's going to be a consequence if there's non-compliancy. So we have to build that into our dogs. So I like my dogs to believe there's always a possibility of a reward. But for reliability, I will use certain corrections and things to get that reliability. But there's a very strategic process of doing that. But if you want to start removing the rewards, you want to start randomizing the rewards. And there's a concept known as fading. So if we're separating our command from the physical cue, sit, cue, down, cue, eventually you're going to say the command, the dog's going to do it. But sometimes more complex behaviors, we have to fade the help that we're doing. And we fade it by just gradually making it smaller and smaller. So if I'm doing a big elaborate cue to get my dog to do the behavior, I'm going to start reducing that over time till eventually it's next to nothing, and then it's nothing and the dog's doing the behavior. So that's a concept known as fading. So you want to keep these things in mind. Now, when we're talking about markers that predict positive reinforcement, there's 3 different types of markers that trainers will use. And I'm going to break down which ones are necessary based on what you're doing and what your goals are. Most people only need 1 marker. So even if you're doing advanced obedience, a lot of times 1 marker is enough. So if you're using 1 marker, you're going to be using the terminal marker. So the release plus reward. So that means when you use this marker, you're also releasing your dog from the position. Now, the next marker is what's known as a continuation marker. This one really is not super necessary for most people. So the continuation marker is telling the dog they're going to receive a reward, but they're not released from the position. So if you're working a stay, let's say your continuation marker is the word good, and you have your dog, excuse me, and your dog's on the stay, you can say good, and you can come back and reward your dog. Good. Come back and reward your dog. So you're telling the dog you're doing the right behavior, I'm going to come and reward you. Now think for a moment, if you weren't using a continuation marker, how else could you communicate with your dog that your dog is doing something you like? Verbal praise. So if I wasn't using the continuation marker, I can go, nice job, good puppy, give him a treat, very good. I can give them feedback still with verbal praise. And dogs are very, very in tune with our emotional state and the way in which we talk to them. So if we talk to them with a nice, sweet voice, they get happy. You see people play jokes all the time. They're like, watch this, my dog's so dumb. They go, and they take their dog and they go, you're such a little dummy dumb, aren't you? You're so stupid. And the dog's like excited and happy. It's because of the tone of voice. And so the tone matters. So you can use verbal praise to replace the continuation marker and still get excellent results. And then the third marker, some people, I call it the secondary terminal marker. Some people call it pre-mac marker, but it means release plus reward, but go and get your reward. That only matters if you have multiple reward options for your dog. So let's say you have a tug in the field where you're training, or in the training building or living room, and you also have a toy on you. And you want to be able to tell your dog, you're correct, you're released, but I want you to take this reward and we're going to play tug. Or you're correct, you're released, go get your reward. So it only matters if your dog has multiple reward options, because what you're doing is you're telling your dog what reward they can go to. You're saying, not that reward, this reward. But if you're never in that situation, then 1 marker is fine. But those are the 3 different markers that a lot of trainers will use. And the more advanced, like protection work, is one in which a lot of trainers, sport dog trainers, protection dog trainers, will use multiple markers because they like to have the ability to tell the dog, go bite the decoy or bite the toy that I have. And if you're training a dog that is doing bite work, as I said before, the dog should love bite work. Like, no trainer is going to waste their time to train a dog to do bite work that doesn't like doing bite work. It's stupid. You wouldn't do it. So if you're doing bite work, the dog enjoys biting the decoy. That means if you have a command like an attack command, you tell your dog attack, or some people use the word pocket, and the dog takes off, that's not a command. That's a marker because it's predicting positive reinforcement. If I tell my dog attack and my dog goes and runs and bites the decoy, that's a marker. So being able to use it. So if I tell my dog free, and free means release plus reward, and I want my dog to bite the tug toy that I have, my dog's going to go, I'm going to bite the decoy because that's what I want. They're not going to care about the tug that I have. So those are the 3 different markers that a lot of trainers use that predict positive reinforcement. Any questions specifically on that? Okay, so this is a good question. Would you have different markers, word sounds for multiple dogs? You can, and it is helpful when you have a lot of dogs. When you have multiple dogs, if you use the same marker, what ends up happening is there's a concept known as learned irrelevance. So if you're using the marker and you're not rewarding them, it could diminish it. Or this happened with my dogs, and it's fine. And I haven't had any issues. I use the same markers with all my dogs, and it took them a little bit to get used to it. But I was being lazy and I didn't want to have all like, I got to remember the markers for this dog, the markers for that dog. And so my dogs quickly figure out who I'm talking to. So if I'm looking at my German Shepherd Maverick and I tell him free, he's going to come to me to get the reward. My dog Ari or Charlie will hear it, but they go, oh, you're talking to Maverick. Okay, fine. And they're able to figure it out. So again, the dog's it's going to depend, but if you want to be as clear as possible and you want to minimize any sort of confusion, using different markers for different dogs is definitely a good practice. It's just harder to do. But if you can do it, if you're disciplined enough to do it, it's great. It's going to be easier for the dogs. Harder for you, easier for the dogs. So that's kind of the trade-off. My Doberman just heard treats and now she's excited. My dog hears your voice and know it's a game. And that's how the dogs should be. They should know it's fun. Do you have any Dutch breeders recommended? No, unfortunately, I don't have any Dutch breeders off the top of my head. So Dutchies, Dutch Shepherds. My dog is and only time I ever had a Dutch Shepherd was when I was going through the Tom Rose School. I had a Dutch Shepherd, but I haven't had one since. My dog is a very long-bodied German Shepherd dog who struggles to get lined up straight in heel position due to my arm not being long enough to lure that far behind me to line him up. Should I work on rear end awareness? Okay, so that is a good question. I'm going to answer it very quickly. Just because it's not on the subject that we're specifically talking about. But yeah, doing power steering helps. So what I do is I like to teach the dogs that rotating my hand will pretend like my hand's down like this. I'm just going to hold like this for the sake. If I turn it, I want my dog's body to turn with my hand. But if you're starting a dog off and you turn your hand, what they'll often do is they'll try to go around your hand to get the treat. So they'll be like, what the heck? How am I doing? So what I do is I hold my hand up against my body in between my legs. And so my legs act as barriers on both sides. So as I start to move my whole body, my dog has no choice. They can't go around. And to keep getting the food, they have to learn to pivot their back end. You can also use a place bowl or a perch for that, where the dog puts their paws on the bowl and you teach them to pivot their back end. But if you're trying to get your dog in heel position and straight, what works for me when I'm first teaching it is I take a big step back with my leg on the same side of the heel position. So if you're doing the traditional left heel position, step back very far with that left leg, lure the dog back, and then bring them back into the heel position. And that can start showing the dog the position. You can also do back chaining. So back chaining is you start in the position you want your dog to be in, and then you shift a little to the side, and you cue your dog into the position you reward. And then you gradually make that distance greater and greater, and your dog knows how to come back to it. So we start in the final picture, back chaining, and we work our way in reverse, essentially. Okay, so I use yes as a continuation marker, and I follow the treat with break to release him. Should I turn break into a release plus reward, or is it okay to release without a treat? So that's a good question, and I've heard people say, like, I use the release marker, and then I always try to clarify, because it is important that we're all talking about the same thing. And the reason why I say that, when someone's like, oh, I use the release marker, I say, what does the release marker mean? What does it predict to your dog? And they go, oh, it releases the dog. And then I go, okay, it's not a marker. At least I don't call it a marker. I call it a release word. And the reason why I call it a release word, so my release word is the word break. So break for my dogs mean you're released, but you're not going to get a treat, which that is often a reward in and of itself. So if I have my dog in heel position and then I release my dog with break, and now my dog can go run around and smell things and pee on stuff, that's a release to the dog, but I'm not treating it as a marker. Or that's a reward to the dog, but I'm not treating it as a marker. I just treat it as a release word. And then I have my other word for release plus reward. So I would keep the word that you use that just predicts a release and use that as a release when you don't want a reward, or there's certain scenarios. So like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're working the place or the climb stay. So the climb stay we'll talk about as the elevated bed. I'm working the climb stay. I want the dog to enjoy being on the climb stay, but I also want to release the dog, but I want more value on the climb stay. So what I might do is I get the dog to go on the climb stay. I start giving the dog rewards. I might throw treats on the bed. So now they're picking up treats off the bed. And then I tell the dog break, and the dog jumps off the bed, and then I don't give him a reward. I guide him back to the bed, and oh, guess what? Now I'm giving him more rewards on the bed. I tell the dog break, they get to jump off, again, no reward. So I'm releasing them. I'm giving them that ability to, okay, release from the position, but I'm not giving them a treat because I'm trying to build more desire on the climb stay. So how we reward and when we reward and what tools we use can help shape our dog's behaviors into the way that we want. So I would suggest keeping that release word and then also adding a terminal marker, release plus reward. So having all of these is going to help with the communication. And now remember, when we mark a behavior, we have as long as the dog is paying attention to deliver the reward. But we have to be, this is also something important to mention. I don't want to have my dog, so let's say I'm busy, I'm doing something, my dog does something really good, and I go free, and free is my terminal marker, release plus reward, and my dog gets up and comes over and he's like, where's the reward? And I'm working on the computer, and I'm like, I'll get it in a second. As long as you pay attention, it's fine. No, the moment I say free, after I say free, I've entered the reward event. So if I'm going to grab the reward, let's say I'm at my computer desk and then off to the side, I have a container with my dog's treats. The moment I say free, I'm getting up and I'm walking to the treats. There's no, like, you started that event, you are entering it. Now, it may take me a few moments before I get the treat to the dog, but I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, you're still paying attention, so you're good. So that's important. If you start the reward event, you're in it. You're getting the dog your reward. So that's going to be our markers for positive reinforcement. Now, the next marker I'm going to talk about is the marker for negative punishment. This is also known as a non-reinforcement marker. For all these markers, the one that predicts positive reinforcement is the one that you can do outside of the dog actually, like, dog really doesn't have to do anything. As long as they're not doing anything bad, you can condition a dog to a marker. You can do how I like to do it, where I do an engagement session. I'm showing the dog, pay attention to me. I'm going to make it fun. Oh, and I also wanted to quickly talk about how I condition them to the markers. If I'm using all three markers, then the way I condition them is, I will say, if I'm using the continuation marker, dog looks at me, I say yes, I give the dog the treat. Yes is my continuation marker. If I'm using the terminal marker, dog looks at me, I say free, I move back, and I get the dog to come to me to get the reward. So I'm kicking in prey drive, play drive, food drive, I'm moving back, and I'm adding that movement and that energy into the reward. And then for the secondary terminal marker, I use the word get it. So dog looks at me, I go get it, and I throw the food. And the dog goes and gets it. Now, remember I said the words mean what they predict. So you might be thinking, well, it sounds like your get it means you're going to throw a reward, not to go get a reward that's already out there. This is how I start. So I say, get it, I toss the food. Get it, I toss the food. Then I might have my dog on a harness, and I'm holding the dog back, and I throw a piece of food, and the dog's looking at it. Oh, I want the food, I want the food. Get it. And now I release them. And now I do that. Now I'm getting the dog to, and I'm using frustration intentionally. I'm holding the dog back with the harness with a little handle or a leash. I'm holding him back. I toss a treat. Oh, I really want it. I really want it. Get it. Boom. Now my dog's, and I'm using that extra energy. And I'll do that in one session. And it's fun. It's a lot of movement. So when I do this, or when I recommend other people do it, make sure you can reward quickly. So if you're not good at food handling, practice food handling. In my course that I have on Sit, Stay, Learn, the first 5 videos, I think, are all on food handling, because you don't want to be slow, especially if you have a dog like Ari, my Malinois, or my German, any of my dogs. They're all super high drive dogs. When they're puppies, I mean, they're very fast. So I want to keep up with that speed, because I want to keep the excitement for the training. Again, we're building a desire for the dog to want to train. So a dog looks at me, yes, here's the reward. They look at me, free. I move back. The dog looks at me, get it. I toss the treat. The dog comes flying back, get it. I toss the treat the other way. Dog comes back, free. I move. So it's very fun and very fast paced, and it's short. I do it very short, and I make sure my words come before my physical cues. Now, let's say I'm using only one marker. I do the same thing. I just use the one marker. So let's say I'm using the word yes. Yes means, yes, I'm using as a terminal marker. So I'm going to go yes, and I'm going to give the dog a treat. Yes, and I'm going to toss the treat. Yes, and I'm going to move back. Yes, I'm going to move back the other way. Yes, I'm going to. So I'm doing all the same ways in which I'm rewarding, but I'm using the same word. And so that becomes a terminal marker. Release plus reward. Go get your reward. Come to me, get your released when you hear it, and you're going to get rewarded. So that's how I start to get a dog conditioned to my markers that predict positive reinforcement. And again, depending on if you're doing 1 marker, 2, or 3, will depend on just how you say the word before you deliver. And that's the way that I like to do it. Adjust any way that works and suits what you want. So you want to think about energy levels. I like my dogs to be very high energy. So I try to build that in. Now, of course, their genetics already play a big role. So let's say my dog Ari, my Malinois in the background, genetically, her speed and motivation is an 8 out of 10. That's just the way she's born. That's her DNA. Now, based on how I do her imprinting, I can reduce that. I can drop it to a 7, a 6, maybe even a 5. But with imprinting, I could boost that up to a 9 or 10. And so that's what I attempted to do. Same thing with Maverick. He was already very high, but I wanted to boost it even more because that's what I like. But if you want a dog that you don't want to be a psycho and you want lower energy, and I say psycho in the best meaning possible for my dogs, if you want lower energy, then you'll present a little lower energy. You're not going to be as maybe not have as much exciting movement, but you still want to keep the training exciting and interesting, and you don't want the dog to check out. So you do have to still keep up with some sort of pace and how you randomize the rewards, but adjust according to what your long-term goals are for your dog. Now, the non-reinforcement marker, that's going to be a sound that predicts negative punishment. I do this sometimes, but I don't often use a marker for negative punishment because when I use my marker for negative reinforcement, the dog is often experiencing negative punishment. So if I have a dog, and we're going to pretend like my dog's on a stay. So this was the dog breaking the stay. This is the dog on the stay for the sake of this example, and my dog is on the bed stay. So if my dog breaks the stay and I say wrong and I take the dog back, wrong is my marker for negative reinforcement. So I would use a leash cue or something to get the dog back. I'm using negative reinforcement to get them to do the behavior. I'm also not giving the dog the reward. So if I was doing a stay and I'm going to reward the dog and I'm coming to reward the dog and the dog breaks the position, wrong. You're not getting the treat now and I'm taking you back. So the dog is experiencing negative reinforcement and negative punishment automatically. But there are some situations where using a non-reinforcement marker could be helpful. And this is for when the dog gives you the wrong answer. You can use a non-reinforcement marker. So you tell your dog down and your dog sits and you go, Your dog goes, oh, okay, that was the wrong answer. Down. The dog lays down, and then you follow it up with the reward. So if I'm using a marker that predicts negative punishment, that's often the context in which I use it. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to use it, but most of the time, I don't really use it that often. But if I do, that might be a situation in which I use it. Now, the next marker is the one that predicts negative reinforcement. And this is primarily what I use when I'm doing what I call a teachable moment. And again, this is all about communication. So a teachable moment is when my dog does something that I don't want them to do. It's not dangerous. It's not destructive. It's just something I don't want. I don't want you breaking the stay. I don't want you going into the baby's room. I don't want you jumping out of the car until I release you. I don't want you biting the rug. If that could be a destructive behavior, but like with a puppy, it's not destructive because they're just not capable of doing much destruction yet, but I'm going to prevent them from practicing it to the point where it is. So if it's dangerous or destructive, I might go to positive punishment, but most of the time I start with negative reinforcement. So again, this is what I call a teachable moment. Now, during a teachable moment, you can actually use a command. So this is how I do the stay. Let's say I have the dog on the stay. The dog breaks the stay. I say wrong. I grab the leash. I guide the dog back. Good dog, no reward. If the dog broke the position, I could also do this. The dog breaks, climb. I guide the dog back. Good dog. Exact same thing. The experience is identical for the dog. The dog broke. I made a noise. I made the dog go back. I said, good dog. I made another noise. So the dog experienced the same thing either way. Either option works. The reason why I say wrong, or whatever word you choose. So if you want to go oops or or whatever word is actually going to, this would be best. Use a word that's going to make you maintain a good mood. So that sounds silly, but if you can say a word that you find funny and it makes you chuckle, if you're like oopsie poopsie, it does. If it's something that kind of like that's kind of funny, then it's going to give you a better attitude while you're training. And it's going to reflect on your dog's performance. Because when I say wrong, I go, wrong, and I show them what I want. It's not a punishment. I don't want the dog to be afraid or worried. I want the dog to know, oh, okay, what is it you would like me to do? And then I show them the preferred behavior. And again, I don't follow it up with a reward. Now, I do this for 2 reasons. I use wrong instead of a command because in the moment when I'm trying to respond, a teachable moment, we're being reactive to our dog. Our dog is doing something and we're reacting to it. The dog jumped out of the car before I released him. I'm reacting to something the dog did. My dogs are not allowed in the kitchen. My dog enters the kitchen. I'm reacting to what my dog did. Your dog jumps up on you. You're reacting to what your dog did. Your dog jumps up on the sofa. You're reacting to what your dog... So you're reacting to what your dog's doing. And because of that, you may not be ready to say the command. Your dog jumps up on the sofa, if that's a rule in your house, and you go, down, sit, off, dang it. But if you know it's wrong and you just go wrong or oopsie poopsie, whatever you say, it's much easier to say that in that moment because it's a marker and you know the word to say. So it simplifies the process. And number 2, the dog becomes generalized to it. They start to quickly realize like, oh, wrong means to stop what I'm doing or go back to the previous position. And it makes it easy to use that in different situations. So I haven't asked if anyone has any questions. So based on everything we just talked about, any new follow-up questions? Let's see. Okay, your German Shepherd is an IGP. Awesome. Medium drive, not always interested in a tug. He's 8 months old. Is there anything I can do to build his drive? So with, is this the wrong time to ask about getting started with a bite sleeve? Yeah, so we're trying to keep it on the markers, but both of these kind of go together. So there's an exercise known as drive building, and drive building is where we use frustration to get the dog to do what we want. Now, frustration can get our dogs to do things we don't want, all right? This is how dogs become reactive on leash. Someone takes their dog out on a walk. They're trying to socialize their dog. They're trying to be a good dog owner, and they let their dog go say hi to dogs and hi to people. Well, now they built the dog's desire. Either A, the dog likes it or they don't like it. Either way, when they take that away, they end up getting a dog that's reactive. They take it away. They say, no, you're not going to say hi to everybody anymore. We only did that when you're a puppy. And the dog goes, but I really like saying hi to people. And now the dog's pulling on the leash. You're pulling back on the leash. That's building tension, frustration, bark, bark, bark. And now we get that reactivity. We can do the same thing for bite work. So, or building toy drive. So what I do when I'm building toy drive is we want to think about the dog's play style. So number 1, I'm going to get a harness for the dog, a harness that the dog can pull with. Now, you can also use an agitation collar. You wouldn't use a collar like this. Agitation collars, they're very thick and allows the dog to pull without putting a lot of pressure on one point on their throat. Again, you wouldn't use something like this. I like to use a harness. So I have a harness on the dog, I have a leash, and the dog's on a back tie, meaning the leash is attached to something. First, I get the dog comfortable in that position. Let them hang out, let them get comfortable. Once they're comfortable, then I'm going to bring out a toy. I'm going to make sure that the leash is tight. So I want to get the dog all the way at the end of the leash, and the leash is tight. What we want to be careful of if you're doing drive building, now if you have someone who can hold the leash, that works too. But let's say this is attached to the harness, even though this is a leash or a collar. Let's say it's attached to the harness. We wouldn't want the leash to be loose, because if I start teasing the dog with the toy and the dog goes, I want the toy, blah, now we just punish the dog while we're trying to build drive. So you don't want to do that. That's important. So what I do is I get the dog at the end of the leash. Now the leash is tight. They feel it pulling on the harness. Now I start teasing them with the toy. So now I'm teasing them with the toy, and the dog's like, oh, I want the toy, bark, bark, I want the toy, bark, bark, bark. And as the dog is barking and getting excited, I respond to their movement. So usually what I do, imagine you're looking at top down. So you're looking top down at the ground. This is where the dog is, and then I'm out here. What I do is I move in a diamond shape. So I might come over here, I come back, I go back this way, I go to the dog. So I'm doing like a diamond shape movement. And I'll go back and forth and I'll change it up a little bit. But a lot of times I'm moving in a response to the dog. So the dog barks and I'm like, oh, dog barks again. Oh, and I get closer. Dog barks again. I get closer. Dog barks again. I deliver the reward. If the dog's a little more hesitant, I might have the reward attached to a rope of some kind, like something that you can hold, but also something that's not going to hurt the dog's mouth. Like I've seen people do this before, and I would advise against it. Don't use a leash as the rope to attach to the toy if the clip side is on the same side as the toy. Meaning, I wouldn't want to go, oh, this will be a good thing to connect to the toy. And then, sorry, it looks like my image froze. And so taking that, tying the toy to it like this. So this is the toy and this is the leash. Don't do that, because if the dog bites the clip, that's not going to be good. I know that sounds obvious, but people have done it. Now you can, if you want, but still not recommended. You can use a leash and loop it through and have it this way. So now you're holding onto the clip, but if the dog rips the clip out of your hand and hits them in the face, or it hits you. So I don't recommend using a leash unless you cut off the clip. So if you cut off the clip and you're using a leash, then a leash is great. You got a handle, works beautifully, but don't keep the clip on there. And you have it attached to the toy, and you can swing the toy around. Now, the further away, and this is good for building confidence with the dog, the further away you are from the toy, the more the dog feels like they possess it. If I'm holding a toy and the dog's holding the toy, who has the toy? Do I have it? Does the dog have it? And again, this is for dogs that are less confident. Eye contact. If I have a dog that's less confident, I'm not going to stare at the dog. If the dog looks at me, I'm going to look away like, oh my gosh, you're so oh, and I'm going to build the dog up that way. And the further away, if the dog has the toy and I'm at the end of a 5-foot line, the dog has the toy. Even though I have control with the line, the dog still has the toy. Once the dog bites it, I get to the end of the leash and then I activate it. I keep it active. Good. I might come in. And then as I come in, I'm holding tension so the dog's not slipping it. I come in, I go, good. I might do a pet and a pat, good. And then I back up again. I come back in, very nice. I play with the dog. I give them a rebite and then I let them win. If they drop it, I pull it away to build more frustration. And in addition, if I have someone helping me, if they're doing the bite stuff, I'm next to my dog. Good, get that toy, get that toy. And then when I'm taking the dog out, this is very short. Doesn't last very long at all. A few minutes at most. When I'm taking the dog out, now I hook the leash I take the leash. If the dog's on a back tie, the leash is attached to something. So I have a new leash. I hook it on the harness. I unhook the other one and I walk the dog out while the dog is pulling. So I'm dragging the dog away. I'm walking backwards and my dog's barking, trying to get the toy. And I'm going, good boy or good girl as I'm backing away. And they're like, bark, bark, bark. And the other person's teasing the dog with the toy the whole way out. If he swings it by him and he grabs it, then he gives the dog a rebite, releases it, and the dog runs off with the toy. If the dog misses, I pull him out. He gets no toy. And now he's like, man, I really want that toy. And so we use frustration to build drive. And so you can increase, and that's why they call it drive building. So you can increase it. I know I kind of explained that quickly. I hope that gives you somewhat of an idea. And maybe I'll make a video on that. I think that would be a video worth making. Where were we? Sorry. Have you ever tried using different languages for commands for different dogs? Yep, you can definitely do that. So you could teach one dog in German, one in French, one in Spanish, one in English. You can definitely do that. And that will help keeping them from being confused. So that is good. And like I said, learned irrelevance also comes into play if you have multiple dogs and you're doing the same commands. So usually with my personal dogs, most of the time I use my informal communication. So my informal communication is just when I talk to them. So I'm like, come on guys, let's go. Come on puppies. I call my dogs puppies, even though one's 10 and one's 9. I call them all puppies. So I talk to them that way. I talk to my dogs all the time. So when I go down into my office downstairs where my dogs are hanging out right now, this is my studio setup, so I don't have them in here because I don't want them distracting, making noise, playing. So when I go down and I'm working on the computer, I go down there, I'm like, what's going on, my pups? What's going on, Maverick? I'll pet Maverick. I'll pet Ari. Charlie right now is actually at my friend's house hanging out about 5 minutes down the street. So they're going on hikes and stuff. But Charlie's like, hey, Charlie, good boy. So I talk to them. I communicate with them quite a bit. And I use a lot of informal. When we're getting ready to leave, I'm like, come on, let's go, guys. And then we go upstairs. If I pull out the remote collars, they get crazy excited because they know we're going on a hike or we're going to play tug or we're going to play fetch or something like that. would you condition your dog to focus on you? Or how would you condition your dog to focus on you? So I mentioned that a little bit earlier. And I love the teachable moment marker. Yeah, it's great. I love the teachable moment too. So I talked about that a little earlier to getting the dog to focus, but with all behaviors, we get the behavior, then we add the command. So usually what I'll do is I'll make a noise, or I'll just wait for the dog to look at me. Once they look at me, yes, I'll reward them. Or I might take food and hold it by my face. Dog looks in that direction. Yes, I reward them. And then when I remove the food, the dog still looks at my face. I mark and reward that. And then if I want, I can put it on a command. So I can say focus, dog looks, yes, reward. And eventually I say focus, dog looks at me. All right, so when we are getting the dog conditioned in negative reinforcement, that's how I'm using it. I'm using it in teachable moments. And then the last marker is our marker for positive punishment. So positive punishment, remember we talked about this briefly in the very beginning, positive and negative, adding and taking away, reinforcement, encouraging the repeat, punishment, preventing the repeat. Also, when we're thinking about these 4 quadrants, we also have to consider what are our intentions as the trainer, and what is the dog's perception? So if I take a dog, so think about this real quick. Tell me if this is positive punishment or if this is negative reinforcement. If I take a dog and I want the dog to go to their bed over here, and I tell them to go to their bed, I say climb, and then I go pop, 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 all the way till the dog gets there. Would that be negative reinforcement or would that be positive punishment? It's kind of a trick question. It's how the dog perceives it, but it's our intention. Now, when I use negative reinforcement, I don't want the dog to ever perceive it. Someone said something. Okay, I was seeing if it was based on what we were just talking about. If I use negative reinforcement, I do not want the dog to perceive it as positive punishment. If the dog perceives it as positive punishment, then I am using too much pressure for the behavior. So in that situation with the pop, 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 if the dog's like, oh no, all the way there, even though my intention was to get the dog to do the behavior, technically it's negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, there's multiple wrong answers, there's one right answer. And in that situation, it's going on to the climb bed that I had off to the side. But if the dog perceives it as punishment, in my opinion, it's not a good use of negative reinforcement. Now, if I do those pops and it's very light leash pops, and the dog complies and those leash pops stop, and the dog doesn't perceive it as a punishment, and they understand it's to do a behavior, then it's fine. But I usually use leash pressure. So I'll give you another example. There's lots of people out there that they'll want their dog to sit, and they'll go sit, pop, 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 till the dog sits, and then they stop popping. If you have a very sensitive dog, that dog might be like, oh no, and then they sit and it stops. Technically, it's negative reinforcement, but the dog had a very bad experience. Now, if it's a dog that is more resilient, the dog might go, Mo, what's that you're doing? All right, I'll sit. Okay, fine. Negative reinforcement. So how the dog perceives it, in my opinion, is important when it comes to negative reinforcement. But by definition, we turn something on. When they comply, we turn it off. But I don't want it to be aversive to the dog. I don't want the dog to see it as something as negative. I want them to see it as a way of me communicating. Now, with positive punishment, the dog's perception is more important than our intention. If I have, I should just hold this dog the whole time. If I have the dog and I say no, and I pop the leash and the dog goes, what was that? That's not an effective punishment. If I have the dog and I have a water hose and the dog does something I don't like and I spray the water hose and the dog's biting at the water, that's not good positive punishment. That's actually positive reinforcement for that dog. So the dog has to perceive it as something that they don't like to prevent the repeat of the behavior. But it should be just enough to get them to not repeat the behavior. It shouldn't be enough that we're creating fear or we're doing anything that's making them worry. And it's also the attitude behind it. So I personally advise against ever using any sort of, let me rephrase it. I advise against making any sort of punishment personal. Now, some people do it. They're like, I want the dog to know I'm upset. I don't like that. I don't want my dog to know I'm upset. I want the dog to think they're controlling me. Remember, operant conditioning is a dog's recognition of patterns within their control, or at least we want them to believe they're in control. So if I give my dog a correction, I want my dog to think that they controlled me. I'm just being a good, compliant human. Also, when I give the correction, it's never personal. So it's no correction. Once a dog's doing what I want, yay! Now, I won't follow it up with a treat or a toy right away because I don't want the dog to take a mild correction to get a reward. If you came up to me and you pinched me, so a behavior I don't want, and then I turned around and I pinched you back, and then I gave you a $100 bill, you're probably going to keep pinching me. You're going to go, yeah, you could pinch me all day for the $100 bill. You'd be like, pinch, and then you go, all right, pinch me, and I pinch you, and then you're like, where's my 100? So if the dog does something we don't like, the pinch, and we punish them, but then we give them a really valuable reward immediately after, there are dogs out there that will intentionally do the behavior, take the correction to get the reward. So once a dog's doing what I want, yeah, good puppy, but I'm not giving them an actual reward. And that's important. That's the same thing with my teachable moments. And when we add corrections, we have to do it in a way that's very fair. So I want to break down the rules that I follow when it comes to adding corrections. And I don't add corrections outside of this. And if you don't feel comfortable using positive punishment on your dog, don't let someone force you to do it. Because if you're not comfortable, you're not going to do a good job, and your dog's going to sense your discomfort, and it's not going to go over well. Also, if you're going to use positive punishment, make sure you're darn good with your timing when it comes to positive reinforcement, and negative punishment before you use positive punishment. If your timing still sucks, do not use positive punishment because you can create more issues. You can create confusion, frustration, aggression. There's lots of things that could be bad about using positive punishment when used the wrong way. So keep those things in mind. But when used the right way, it could help create a very reliable dog. And when presented appropriately, it can keep our dogs very happy and very motivated. There's something that we want to consider. It's the concept of learned helplessness. Some of you may have heard about this before, and I may be mixing up some of the details, but as far as I remember it, this is how it went. They had a container where there was two sections of the container, and there was a door in the middle that separated the two sides. And they put the dog in one side, and they closed the door, and they had a sound that would go off, and then the dog would get shocked in the container. The sound would go off again, and the dog would get shocked again. There was nothing the dog can do to avoid the shock. And so in the beginning, the dog heard the tone, whatever, doesn't mean anything, they got the shock. Then they heard the tone again, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, and they tried to get out, they couldn't get out, they got the shock. They heard the tone again, oh crap, they still couldn't avoid it. Eventually, they heard the tone and they would lay down and they would whimper. They'd be like, and they would take the shock because they knew that there was no way to get out of it. Then the second group of dogs they had in the container, but this time they had the door in the middle open. So now the tone went off, dog goes, what's that noise? Dog gets the shock. Next time the tone went off, dog goes, oh, there's the tone. Dog jumps to the other side. No shock. So now, anytime the dog's in the container, dog's like, oh, jump to the other side. No shock. The stress went away because the dog knew how to avoid the correction. Then they took the first group that couldn't escape the shock and they put them back in. This time they opened the center door. Now the tone goes off. Now you might be thinking, oh, dog jumps to the other side. Nope, the dog laid down, whimpered, and accepted the shock. Learned helplessness. Very psychologically traumatizing for a dog. If we're using punishment, the dog has to know how to prevent it, has to know how to escape it, and has to know how to turn it off when it happens. If we do not do that, and the dog perceives it as unfair, or the dog has nowhere to put that information, we're going to create a stressed out dog. We're going to create a nervous dog, a fearful dog. The dog's going to have their ears back. They're not going to want to train with you. So it's very important when we use positive punishment, we do it the right way. And it's something that I was just dealing with recently with a client where she was working with a trainer that was doing too many corrections. And when the dog saw the trainer, the dog would get very nervous. And when she was working with the trainer, the dog's tail was tucked the whole time, fearful the whole time, because the dog didn't know where to put the information and wasn't presented the right way. So this is very important. Now, before moving forward, before I explain how I do corrections, any questions on anything so far? When you enter a negative reinforcement event and the dog doesn't respond to leash pressure very well, like when you're working with a client's dog, would you use food to help lure guide the dog? So that's a good question. When I'm teaching a dog, when I'm using leash pressure, the dog already has to know leash pressure. So I want to make sure the dog knows leash pressure. So here's a good analogy. Negative reinforcement for a human. And this is commonly used in the dog training world. The beeping sound that a car makes when you need to buckle your seatbelt. So you get in the car, it beeps. Oh, buckle your seatbelt. You buckle, the beeping stops. The negative, the removal of the beeping, happens after the compliance of the behavior. If you'd never been in a car before and you got into my car and you sat down and it started to beep and you go, what's that beeping? I'm like, I don't know. And they go, how do I stop that beeping? I go, figure it out. That might be stressful. You might get frustrated. You can't turn it off. You're hitting the car, whatever. It's not going off. But if you said, what's that beeping? How do I stop it? And I go, just buckle your seatbelt. And you go, okay. And you buckle your seatbelt. That's how I teach dogs a negative reinforcement. So I do not use negative reinforcement to teach behaviors, meaning I wouldn't take a brand new dog, lift up on the leash, and then when the dog sits, turn off the pressure. I teach the dog how to sit when I lift up on the leash after I already taught the dog to sit. So I lift up on the leash, then I use the food, I cue the dog in the position, I turn off the pressure, I reward the dog. Now, once the dog understands leash pressure, then I also want to make sure they're generalized to it. So this goes to one of the rules where I add punishment. If I'm going to add punishment, I want the dog to be, and this goes with commands, so any sort of command. And when I first teach leash pressure, the dog doesn't know it. But once they know it, I treat it the same way I would treat a command. The dog has to prove to me 80% proficiency on the command in that environment before I use positive punishment. So if I'm using leash pressure and the dog hasn't proven 80% proficiency on leash pressure in that environment, I'm going to act as if the dog doesn't know it. And so if I apply the pressure and the dog looks confused, I will use the food lure, I'll show the dog how to do it, and I'll reward them. But once the dog is 80% proficient, if they don't comply to the leash pressure, then I can punish that using positive punishment. So my preferred way is to use a remote training collar. So I condition the dogs to the tone setting, and the tone will predict the correction if the dogs don't comply to the tone. So this would be an example where I would use the tone, and the tone is just a beat. It sounds like this, E, and then it'll transition to a correction. So if I apply the leash pressure and I know the dog's 80% proficient and the dog ignores me, I press the tone. E, dog goes, oh, and moves forward, I release the tone. So I'm using negative reinforcement with negative reinforcement, basically. If I don't have that and I'm only using the leash and I know the dog's 80% proficient in that environment, I apply the leash pressure. I go 1 Mississippi, no, pop, and then I go right back to the pressure. Dog moves forward, I go, yay, good puppy. So I will correct them for non-compliancy to the leash pressure. But again, I want to make sure they're 80% proficient. So that's how I do that. Any other questions before we move forward? And we're getting close to the end, so we're almost done. Do you think using no as a... So that sounds horrible. Clarify what you mean by that sounds horrible. As far, are you talking about what I was saying? How I think you're talking about the learned helplessness. I agree. It is horrible. Do you think using no as positive punish marker can be detrimental if other family members say no without incorporating punishment? Okay, so that's a good question. Remember, the markers are based on how we say it, not the word itself. So when I say no, like I'm talking right now, and I say no, if my dog was here and I said no just like this, my dog would ignore it. It doesn't mean anything to my dog. When I say no as a marker, I go, no, and then I follow through. Now, dogs are also very situational. So let's say now I recommend everyone in the house follow the same rules to be consistent with the dog. But let's say, I mean, you can only control people so much. Let's say you have 4 people in the family and everyone's using the same words. Your dog's eventually going to learn the difference between your no and this person's no and this person's no, and the dog can become conditioned to each one. And eventually a dog can become generalized, where they understand no means a marker for positive punishment. But if you're very consistent with your no, so every time you say no, you follow through with the correction, you're just going to have more reliable obedience with your dog, and everyone else in the family is going to have less reliable obedience. That's really what's going to happen. And I get it all the time. People are like, my dog listens to me, but my dog won't listen to my spouse. Or my dog listens to me, but not the kids, or whatever. The dog has learned that you follow through, whether they might get a reward or they're preventing a correction or whatever it is. The dog understands that with you, they're going to be more compliant, and with other people, they're not. So you want to try your best to keep everybody on the same page and use the same words, but them not correcting after they say no, or them not rewarding after they say yes, is not going to damage your marker. So as long as you reward after you say yes, your marker will still be 100% charged. And if you correct after you say no, your no marker will still be 100% charged. So that was a good question. My pup is not good with the leave it command towards the cat. If I use leave it, but he gets to the cat, is the cat a reward itself? And can it be corrected with a no after he gets it? So that, as long as it's not dangerous, that I would treat the same way as what I was talking about with the teachable moment. So the moment the dog starts to go after the cat, I would say wrong. I show the dog the preferred behavior. Once they're doing it, good dog. And I'll do that, I'll do that every single time the dog tries to go after the cat. Until eventually, and this is how I make the transition, and this goes with stays, boundaries, anything. Each one is its own separate thing. If, let's pretend... Sorry, my image froze, so I want to make sure everyone sees this. So let's pretend the dog goes after the cat, and I say wrong, and the dog stops. The moment the dog shows me that, the next time they go after the cat, it's going to be a no, and I'm going to correct them. So I'm going to use some kind of positive punishment, whether it's a leash pop or a stim on a remote collar. If you want to give your dog the benefit of the doubt, using the tone is very helpful, and this is why I'm such a huge advocate of the tone. You might see back there, ecollar.com. That's where I get my remote collars, and those remote collars have a tone setting. And it's very nice because once the dog conditioned to the tone, and the way that I condition them to the tone initially is I might have the dog on a flexi or a long line. I press the tone, dog goes, what's that noise? I cue the dog with the leash, dog comes running towards me, I release the tone, I go, yay, good dog. And I do that over and over again so the dog starts to respond to the tone. And then I use the tone to replace leash pressure. So all the situations where I would use leash pressure, I now use the tone. And the dog becomes conditioned to that. So then when the dog decides to go after the cat, I can just hit the tone. And if the dog stops, I release, dog avoids the punishment. Now, negative reinforcement can get you very good reliability, but it does take longer and you have to do more of it. So if you want quicker reliability, once the dog is responding to negative reinforcement without your actual help, so you say wrong and the dog stops on their own, then it's fair to use positive punishment. So then when the dog goes after the cat, instead of saying wrong or whatever your word is, you would say no and give the dog a correction. If you had a remote collar on, you don't have to say no. You can just give the dog the correction. So whatever works. Now, when we're correcting a dog with a remote collar, and this is a guideline, it's not for every dog, but a guideline I tell people that's good to follow is if your dog is actively engaged with another living thing, don't use the remote collar when the remote collar is on the dog's neck. Because for some dogs, that can make them more aggressive towards whatever they're engaging with. And I saw it happen in real life. So a protection trained dog came to say hi to one of my friends, jumped up to say hi. The dog's paws went on her shoulders, and then the other trainer shocked the dog, and the dog bit her in the face. And the dog was going up to say hi. So that's a rule that I pretty much follow, and it's for safety. So you want to keep safety in mind. So if your dog's already engaged with the cat, I would recommend not using the remote collar because it could cause the dog to be aggressive towards the cat. So you'd want to correct the dog before getting to the cat. But I always show the dogs what I want first with negative reinforcement before applying positive punishment because, again, I want to be fair. Now, just like we talked about in the very beginning, when a dog is classically conditioned to something, and a dog can be classically conditioned to lots of different things, whatever is the first stimulus in the sequence that the dog has learned the pattern, that's where we see the change of behavior. So we say, yes, the dog salivates. You grab your leash, your dog knows that means you're going to go on a walk. Your dog gets excited because you're going to go on a walk. It's predicting that. So when our dog's conditioned to the word no, or whatever word you use, then you're also going to see a change of behavior. This is important before you give the correction. The 4 most common that I've seen with the training style that I teach is number 1, I call instant compliancy. We say no and the dog does what we wanted. So the dog breaks the stay, we say no, dog goes back to the stay. We tell the dog down, dog doesn't do it, we say no, dog lays down really quick. Instant compliancy. Number 2 is what I call evasion. We say no, dog goes, I'm out of here, you're not correcting me. Number 3 is what I call freeze in place. That one's pretty self-explanatory. We say no, dog freezes, uh-oh. And number 4 is the dog runs to the human. Now there's variations. I've seen dogs bark at people, like they say no and the dog's like, bark. Like they give them attitude back. So there are different variations, but the number 1 most common in the training system that I use is instant compliancy. And this is where a lot of people make mistakes and they end up not getting full compliancy within their obedience. So if I have the dog and I'm working on the stay, dog breaks the stay, I say wrong, dog goes back on their own. I go, next time I can use a no and I can give the dog a correction. Now I can get reliability. So the dog breaks the position, I say no, and the dog goes back on their own. If that happens, what do? Think about that for a moment. Most people tell me, I'll praise a dog. I'll tell them good dog. I'll reward the dog. I'll ignore the dog. Those are all wrong answers. You still give the dog the correction. So the dog breaks the position. No, even if they go back, I'm still going to give them the correction, whether it's the leash pop or the stim on the remote training collar. And you might be thinking, but he did what we wanted. But he did what we didn't want. And that's the important thing. So I'll give you a human example. The red and blue lights that flash behind you before you get your speeding ticket, those red and blue lights act as a marker for us. We're speeding, we see the red and blue lights. Oh, no. You slow down and you pull over to the side. You're getting a correction. You changed your behavior after you saw the red and blue lights, but you're still, best case scenario, you get a warning, but that's still negative punishment. There was still a punishment. It's not like you see those red and blue lights, you slow down and the police officer goes, good job, and drives away. That doesn't happen. So it's the same thing with our dogs. This is what I call a correction event. The moment the dog does the behavior that triggers the no triggers the correction event. The correction event is over when the dog receives the correction. But just like I was saying with the wrong, I treat corrections under the correction event the same way, meaning I don't get angry, I don't get frustrated, it's cause and effect. So if this was the dog I was training with, and the dog broke, and I said no, and the dog went back very quickly, I would still walk to the dog, I give him the correction, and then he's doing what I want, and I go, yeah, good dog. I'm not going to give him a treat, because again, I don't want him to offer up the behavior to get the correction, to get the reward, but I still tell him good job. Now, I want to go over how I correct. Now, that's for teachable moments, and all of them are the same. If I'm reacting to the dog, I start with wrong, my marker for negative reinforcement. I show them the preferred behavior. I do enough repetitions until the dog responds to wrong for that specific situation in that environment. Then I transition to a no, and that's how I get my compliancy without creating stress, because I've given the dog an opportunity to learn. With commands, I want 80% proficiency on that command in that environment. But a few different things can happen. And if the dog's not 80% proficient, I already know I'm going to give them the answer if they need the help. Remember, I consider commands the same as questions and the answer the physical cue. So if I say down, I'm asking the dog, I'm saying, hey, do you know what to do when I say down? And the dog goes, no, I don't know what to do. And I go, this is what you do. And I lure the dog into the down. And I go, good dog. And I do that over and over and over again until eventually the dog does it. So that's like going, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4. What's 2 plus 2? It's 4. What's 2 plus 2? And they go 4. And you go, that's right. That's exactly what I'm doing with the dog. Now, if I notice the dog is thinking about the answer, I'm going to give them the opportunity to process. So if I say down, the dog's like, I think this is it. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. And they lay down, then I go free, and I give them a big reward. And now he's going to increase speed the next time because he did it and he got released and rewarded and it was great. And his confidence in the position increased. So confidence can increase speed as well. If a dog's not 100% sure, they might go slow, but not because they're not motivated, but because they're unsure if that's the right answer. So then I will reward them for that. If they are 80% proficient, number one, I want to make sure I have the dog's attention. So if my dog is doing something else, sniffing the ground, Ari, huh? Come. Yay! So I get their attention first. Then if I give them the command, if they ignore me, they go, I'm not going to do it. Pfft. And I notice that within that first half second, that's when I say no. So let's take this dog again for an example. And I'm going to use the leash. So we're going to take this and hook it on. Let's say I have the dog in front of me and I tell the dog down, and the dog goes, nah, not going to do it. The moment I see that, I go no, and I pop the leash, giving the dog a correction. Let's say I say no, and the dog lays down very quickly. I'm still going to give the correction. After the correction, the dog is already laying down, so I go, good, nice job. I'm not going to pet, but I'm saying, good job. If the dog is standing and I say down, and the dog doesn't do it, and I go no, and I give the dog the correction, and they're still standing, now I'm going to say down, and I'm going to help them do it. I'm going to use the leash. I'm going to guide them into the down, good dog. What I'm not going to do is this. I'm not going to say down, no, correction. Down, no, correction. I'm not going to do that. After the first correction, I'm going to assume the dog is mildly stressed, even if I'm being friendly and happy about it. Some dogs are going to get a little stressed. And if you've ever been in a stressful situation, think about how much information you forget. And there's science behind it. When we're stressed or we're anxious, our memory does not work as well. So I'm going to think about that with my cute doggy that I love that I'm training. If I say down and my dog doesn't do it, and I say no and I correct, and I say down, I'm going to help them. Good, nice job. If I tell the dog down and they do a different behavior, I don't correct that. So either A, I give them the answer, good job, because they were trying to do it, so there's no reason to punish that. That would be silly in my opinion. Or they do the behavior and I ask them again, down, and then they go into the position and I reward them. If I say, so let's say the dog breaks the stay and I say no and the dog freezes. I give them the correction, climb, I guide them back to the stay. So again, I assist them. And that is, I think, enough for today's video. So today's video, we'll take a couple final questions too, but the goal of today's video was to help everyone get a deeper, better understanding of how we build focus, engagement, and enhance our overall communication so we can be consistent, clear, and fun to work with our dogs so we can teach our dogs how to properly navigate within our human world so they can live the happy, great lives that they definitely deserve. So any final questions? Okay, yeah, don't reward with the cat. Honestly, I haven't had to use much positive punishments. She's so good and driven. Yeah, and that's possible. Like my dog Charlie, never have to use positive punishment with him. Ari, I only have to use positive punishment with her usually when she's in a very high drive state. And she doesn't even care because it's kind of part of the game. I'm not comfortable with shock collars because mine got pressed without me knowing for a long period, felt horrible. Are there only tone ones? So that with the e-collar technology with the tone works really well. And if you're worried about accidentally shocking your dog, on those collars that e-collar technology has, you set the tone setting, you turn the collar down to 0, and then you lock it. So then you only have tone. I don't know, to be honest, if they sell ones with just the tone at a cheaper price, but you can do that with the ones that have the tone. You can get the micro educator, which I think is the cheapest option, at least as far as I know. Definitely check out the website, ecollar.com, and you'll see it. But again, that's what I would do if I didn't want the dog. And that's actually what I do when I'm conditioning a dog to the tone. I turn the collar to 0, I lock it in place, and I just use the tone. So I don't accidentally stim the dog. So that's definitely a good option. If your puppy's having trouble with the down, if you can't get the dog, so one of the common things with the down is you're taking a food lure, you lure your dog down and your dog goes down, but that butt stays up. And you're like, just put the butt down. So what I do with this is I grab a handful of food with 2 hands, I bring it down to the ground, and then I give the dog a piece at a time. So I'm feeding food into the hand and I'm giving the dog food. So the dog's down and I'm giving piece, 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 piece. guess what's going to happen? Eventually, the dog goes, man, this is tiring keeping my butt up. And the dog lays down, and I go, yay! And I give him the whole handful. Well, that's way better. So then when I lower it again, dog's like, oh yeah, lays down, open the hand, I give them the full reward. And I do this for a couple reasons. If I'm trying to get the dog to lay down and their butt's up and they're not getting the reward dependent on the dog's perseverance level, a lot of dogs will give up. The dog goes, forget it, I can't get it, and they leave. And you're like, no, you can do it, come on. So instead, by giving them rewards, it keeps them there. So I'm giving them one piece at a time, and they get tired keeping that butt up, and they will drop the butt, and then we give them the reward. That's going to work on most dogs. If for some reason, on the rare case I can't get the dog to lay down doing that, then the next thing I do is what I call the petting down. So I have a handful of food, and I'm giving the dog the food, so pretend I'm feeding the dog food. And then with my other hand, I'm petting the dog down their body, but I'm applying pressure, and I'm doing it like a massage. I'm making it nice, like a nice little massage for the dog. The dog is gonna be like, man, this is really nice. I'm gonna lay down and relax. Yay! And then I open my hand and I give my dog all the food. And then the last option, if all that doesn't work, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start capturing my dog laying down. Every time my dog lays down, free, I'm going to give my dog the reward. Dog lays down, free, I'm going to give the dog the reward. I'm going to do that a bunch of times so my dog starts connecting a very strong positive association to the dog down. You should be able to get the dog to lay down. And last case scenario is I'll use leash pressure. So I'll use the leash pressure and I'll pull the dog. Again, I don't like teaching dogs behaviors with the pressure. But if I can't get the dog to do it, I'll apply the leash pressure. So now the dog can't, and I'm going to do the petting. Because I don't want the dog to be stressed, and I'm going to apply pressure as I pet, and then the dog's going to lay down. But the odds of having to do that are very low if you do the other steps. So I would recommend trying that. Okay. Do you have any tips for teaching retriever sport training? Distance, directional hand signals. Okay, so I haven't personally trained a hunting dog. And so I think that's what you're talking about with hunting dogs. But this is how I would do it if I'm trying to teach my dog directions. Now, I've done lots of retrieval training. But if I was trying to teach my dog a signal, go this way or go that way, I'm going to use targets. So either A, you can use something like a climb bed, so a place bed for the dog, or you can use perch bowls or place bowls, some people call them. So a place bowl would be, I should have one here so I can demonstrate. It's a little bowl and you teach the dog to put their paws on it. Now, it's good to use both. So I know a lot of trainers where the climb command or the place bed, the beds, they keep that at a low arousal state, a low arousal state. So the bed always means go relax, chill out. And then they use the place bowl for a high arousal, excitement, training, bite work, whatever, jumps, whatever. So using the bowl is good. So you teach the dog to go on the bowl. And I do have a video on that, and there's lots of videos online how to do it. I do it with luring. So I lure the dog until eventually they place a paw on. Yes, I reward that. Eventually 2 paws. Yay, I reward that. And then you can place the target. So what I would do is I would have one bowl directly in front of me. I would have one off to the right side and one off to my left side. And I would start right next to my dog. I would show my dog the hand signal, and then I would give my dog the command, whatever that command is, and then I would guide my dog to the other bowl. And then I would do it the other way. So signal first, guide the dog, get them to the bowl, reward. As they start to understand that, I'm going to increase distance the same way that I would if I was increasing distance for change of position exercise. So if I want a dog to do it down from a distance, I start close and I gradually increase distance. And when we give the command, it doesn't matter how much we help as long as we get them to do it. Meaning, let's say I'm 10 feet away. I got my dog on the bowl in front of me. My dog's looking at me and I hold my hand out and I go right, whatever the command is. And my dog jumps off and looks at me and it's like, I know you said something. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to continue to walk all the way to the bowl. The dog's going to be like, huh? And they're going to follow me and they're going to go there and I'm going to reward them. Because that's the reinforcement event. The reinforcement event is when we want our dog to do a specific action. So once I give the command, it's my responsibility to get the dog to do it. Now, sure, that time I may have had to walk the entire way there, even all the way and get it. Doesn't matter. The more I do it as I increase distance, or if I need to come closer, I can do that. But eventually we're going to do it and the dog goes, oh, if I point and my dog, I say right, and my dog jumps off and looks at me and I start walking, dog goes, oh, and runs off to the side. So I'm just using it as an indicator. Think about it this way. We'll go back to the commands or the questions like, what's 2 + 2? And the dog's like, and you go, it's the dog, 4. Yes, exactly. Sure, in the very beginning, I had to go 4 to get, but now I can just start to say the word, the dog, up 4. So it's the cue that triggers it in the memory. So yeah, don't worry about that if I have to show, and that's how I would start teaching directional stuff. Now, I'm sure there might be other ways to do it, and I'm sure you can find courses on it, but that's how I would do it. I don't want to sit here and tell you I've trained a bunch of hunting dogs when I personally haven't. And I have done retrieval training, though. So retrieval training, that's a whole different beast as well, and there's a lot to go over. There are lots of dogs that will do motivational retrieves. Sometimes you have to do forced, although I don't like saying forced because there are really, really bad ways to do forced retrieves, and there are ways that are very minimal stress, if any, if you do it the right way. And so that's a very complex exercise, but ideally, my preference is always motivational. If I can teach a dog to do it motivationally, that's what I'm going to do with. So only forced if motivational is not working and the dog has to do it. So I trained a service dog recently. The dog had a retrieve. That was a big part. We started with motivational, but the dog was way too goofy with it. And so I had to do a little bit of a force to get the dog to do it with precision, because the dog would pick it up, but then the dog would throw the keys and throw things around with its head movement. And so by adding a little bit of force, which is negative reinforcement, so I wasn't, they call it a forced retrieve, but a lot of people do a punishment retrieve. When I do forced, I'm using negative reinforcement. And when it's clear, you get the nice results. But still, I like to teach everything, like I said, using reward-based techniques. Let's see. Thanks, Nate. Thank you. Thank you, guys, everyone. Do you recommend Michael Ellis's course? If you're still on listening, 100%. So Michael Ellis's online stuff is $70 for a membership. In my opinion, that's basically free. I signed up about a week and a half ago, and I wish I had done it earlier. And now all my downtime, I'm just listening to Michael Ellis. I mean, the guy's a wizard. So yes, highly recommend it. For what you're paying, I mean, even if you had to pay $500 a month, it'd probably still be worth it. Are you doing these videos at the same time each day? So the schedule, I posted it in the community section. I also posted it on Facebook. So tomorrow, I can tell you what time tomorrow is. Let me just pull it up real quick. If I can find it, give me a moment. So tomorrow is 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Do you have any advice on obsession with light reflection in shadows? So any sort of obsession, often helping a dog do the right behavior, can help. So feelings follow actions, just as actions can follow feelings. So we'd have to talk about that in more detail. And I do have to end this. So thank you so much. Thank you. Everyone who said thank you. I appreciate it. And again, we're going to have to do another one later. For those of you that I wasn't able to answer your question, consider becoming a channel member. I do live Q&As like this for my channel members. And it's a great opportunity to get your questions answered if you were unable to get it during a live Q&A. And also for my channel members, anytime they post a comment on any video, the way that I do it now, I used to respond to all the comments by channel members. I wish I could respond to everybody, but I just don't have time. But when channel members leave comments on videos, I also answer those in my live Q&As that are just for channel members. So if you need your question answered, it wasn't answered, consider becoming a channel member. You just go to my YouTube channel. There's a join button. Click on that. $1.99. You can join a higher tier if you want. There's no extra value really. It's just if you wanted to support the channel more, but $1.99 gets you in. So if you didn't get your question answered, you can do that and the question will be answered there. So thank you again, everyone, for watching, for hanging out with me today for another live Q&A. I hope I see you all tomorrow and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.